partners, colleagues from the Cabinet Office, and the members of the Cohort 3. I know you are very committed to the process. We have had the dialogue initially, and I can feel the passion. I just want to remind us that one of the reasons why the Cabinet Office, through the Public Sector Modernization Division, has been partnering with the entities, in particular, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information on this project or program, is based on the recognition that we will never be able to compete as a country if our systems are not integrated. In fact, you have seen countries how they are able to connect their systems, and since 2002, I know we have struggled with this whole business of integration. Some refer to it as join-up government. We have been very successful, but there are some significant lessons that would have learned through the process. That without a proper records management system, it's going to be difficult for us to serve and to compete. And this is why we are part of the process, working with the Ministry of Education and JARD to ensure that this priority program is a success. It's going to be difficult to achieve some of the priority projects. It's difficult for us to achieve our mission. So, members of Cohort 3, I am very happy that you have taken this bold step. It won't be easy. And I just want to appeal to Mr. Morgan, as he not even warm the chair at this point yet, that we have to work with these entities, particularly to engage key ministries like finance, to understand that how we have been operating, we cannot operate the same way. And therefore the budgetary support and that which is needed to modernize the structures and the staffing will be critical to this drive. We're very optimistic, and what I'm seeing with the entities, I like the passion. And in this regard, we just want to ensure that this process is smooth for all of us. And we're very optimistic that at the end of the day, we will achieve what we had set out to achieve in terms of the digitization that we seek and the join-up government. Thank you.
Honorable Minister Robert Nestor Morgan, Minister of State, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Principal Director, Mr. Dwayne Cargill, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Mr. Wayne Thompson, Principal Director, Office of the Cabinet, Mrs. Claudette Thomas, Government Archivist, Jamaica Archives and Records Department, RIM practitioners, Access to Information officers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us on social media. The Access to Information Unit is pleased to be here and celebrating with the Cohort 3 for the launch of Cohort 3 of implementation, and to participate in this workshop on International Day for Universal Access to Information 2020. The importance of records and information management to the delivery of access to information services is very critical. Without proper records and information management, access to information is difficult to deliver for the people of Jamaica. The Access to Information Act was passed in 2002, and it's now been 18 years since we passed that legislation, and 15 full years since it's applied to all public authorities. The synergy with the theme of International Day for Universal Access to Information 2020, and that the theme for this workshop, which is Records Management, Saving Lives, Building Trust, Bringing Hope, and the theme for International Day for Universal Access to Information is Saving Lives, Access to Information, Saving Lives, Bringing Hope, building trust, bringing hope. There is no doubt that for us to be strengthen access to information, that investments in records and information management are critical. So any investments that we do in terms of records and information management strengthens access to information, strengthens the delivery of access to information services, and at all times we remember that the underpinnings, the reasons why we have this access to information framework is to strengthen our democracy, increase transparency, increase public participation in national decision making, and increase accountability of public authorities to members of the public. And in that vein, we are very supportive of all the work that is being done with RIM practitioners who are often access to information officers as well in terms of the delivery of access to information services and improving records and information management in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. We'll now take remarks from the government archivist, Mrs. Claudette Thomas, from the Jamaica Archive and Records Department. Okay. All right. So we will move on, and we will now take our main address from our minister, Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Minister Morgan.
Thank you, Dwayne. Chairman, Mr. Cargill, Acting Principal Director here at the Information Division, Mr. Wayne Thompson, who was with us earlier, Principal Director of the Cabinet Office, Ms. Thomas, Claudette Thomas, Government Archivist, Jamaica Archives and Records Department, Mr. Cox, Director of the Access to Information Unit here at the MOEY. Like myself, you are a new recruit, I suspect. Mr. Hector Stevenson, Executive Director of the Overseas Examination Commission. Good to see you again, sir. And Access to Information Officers, Record Management Practitioners, members of the team here from the Jamaica Information Service who are assisting us with executing this event, and also persons who will be listening and watching over the next few days. A productive International Day for Universal Access to you all. The International Day for Universal Access is a celebration spearheaded by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and it's held on the 28th of September, which is today, this year. The commemoration began in 2019 at the 74th United Nations General Assembly, and this year's theme is Access to Information, Saving Lives, Building Trust, Bringing Hope. And it examines the right to information in times of crisis and on the benefits of having constitutional, statutory, and policy guarantees for access to information by the public and its relationship to saving lives, building trust, and aiding the creation of sustainable policies during and after the current COVID pandemic. The International Day for Universal Access to Information advocates for the adoption and implementation of sound constitutional and statutory and policy guarantees, endorses principles of the right to information in times of crises, and highlights the impact of proactive sharing of information on health and education, as well as the inclusive and gender-sensitive initiatives focusing on vulnerable groups for prosperity and sustainability. The government of Jamaica is far advanced in its efforts in achieving these objectives, and we remain committed to transparency and openness. Our commitment is reflected in the promulgation of the Access to Information Act in 2004. That was about 18 years ago, Mr. Cox, right? And to reinforce and give further effect to certain fundamental principles underlying the system of constitutional democracy that we have, namely government accountability, transparency, public participation in national decision-making. By granting to the public a general access to documents held in public or by public authorities, subject to exemptions which balance the rights against the public interest in exempting from disclosure certain government, commercial, and personal sensitive information, the government, through the Ministry of Science and Technology, has also moved further ahead and has drafted an open data policy, which will see the proactive sharing of government data to the public. Additionally, the government remains committed to review of the Access to Information Act, which has been in operation since. It is also important to mention at this time the passage earlier this year of the Data Protection Act, which is important in that it further reinforces the importance of information sharing and also the control of how information is shared, at the same time seeking to protect the personal information of Jamaican citizens and others who may use their personal data to access government and private sector services. And I think if we look at the whole ecosystem of information sharing now with data protection and so on, Jamaica will be leaps ahead of many other countries globally in terms of how we have organized our legislative and policy frameworks around access to information and data protection and sharing. Governments are called upon and held accountable to inform citizens on their actions through the right to information. This is especially critical during crises such as the present COVID-19 pandemic. It is for this reason that UNESCO has cautioned against the withholding or censorship of health-related information from the public, with transparency and disclosure acknowledged as pivotal towards sustainable development, ensuring access to health, education, and justice. We are pleased as a government to note that we remain true to this transparency concept and have consistently provided such information through this pandemic. Many Jamaicans would have seen our digital press conferences by the Minister of Health. There have been press conferences led by the Prime Minister as well, which have consistently sought to crucial in the fight against COVID-19. One of the other important facts that we should mention during this period is the fact that Jamaica continues to be in the top 10 of countries in terms of their ranking on the World Press Freedom Index. We, over the last 4 years, have bobbed between 8 and 6. The recent ranking showed us at 6. And I think, as I mentioned earlier about the ecosystem of information sharing, the Press Association says that the free press is an oxygen for democracy. And I think that is really correct. But also, not just the freedom of the press, but also freedom for all citizens to access information contributes significantly to the continuance of our democratic institutions and our current constitutional framework, which to a great extent has protected the freedoms of a vast majority of Jamaicans. The seamless access to information can only happen when the importance of record creation, preservation, maintenance, use and disposal is acknowledged. It is for this reason that Cabinet in 2018 approved the implementation of the GOJ Records and Information Management Policy, which requires all public sector entities to comply. This policy outlines standards for the effective management of records and information management across all sectors. And we are pleased to announce that through the support of the Cabinet Office and led by the Jamaica Archives and Records Department, we will commence the implementation of the GOJ RIM program in an additional 25 ministries, departments, and agencies. This will now ensure that all ministries standardized across the public sector and reduce the time in which entities take to retrieve records and information for access to the public. We want to also make a special appeal to ministries, departments, and agencies in this cohort to comply with the timelines for your project and work closely with the team to fully implement this RIM program. As the team provides support to you in the implementation of the process, they will also be monitoring, tracking, and reporting on your progress to the RIM Oversight Committee, that is Records Information Management Committee. As we modernize the RIM process across the public sector, this ministry, Education, Information and Youth, with the support of the Cabinet, is currently undertaking a strategic review of the Jamaica Archives and Records Department with a view of capacitating the department to fully undertake its mandate as outlined in the RIM policy and legislation. A modernization of Archives Act is also being undertaken to bring legislation in line with new trends and development in records and archives management field. In closing, we wish to reaffirm the government's commitment to the access to information within the parameters of the legislation, and will continue to enhance our record management systems to allow the government information to be accessed in a timely manner. As we also celebrate Right to Know Week, the Access to Information Unit will be active in the social media space as well as the traditional media space, engaging and proactively providing information to the public. The fact is that access to information and the government's work in seamlessly aligning the interest of the public to gain information with the information that is available is fundamental to maintaining our constitutional framework by securing the freedoms that Jamaicans are entitled to. And this ministry and the agencies associated with it further commit to continue providing information within the framework of the law. And I, as the minister, commit to enhancing that framework, working with all the stakeholders, working with all the members of staff to ensure that when the public has a right to know, they know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We certainly took note of the commitments that have been made, and I know that public servants, we are ready and raring to go to support the government in its implementation of the various policy and legislative decisions. And we know that with your support, as you have committed, Minister, we will be able to move forward and to provide better service through the modernization of our RIM programs and procedures as we move forward to serving the people of Jamaica. At this time, I had indicated our programs will be twofold, so we are in fact commemorating the International Day for Universal Access to Information. But as Minister has said, that it is important for us to ensure that the records management processes are properly aligned and effective so that we can provide the access. And in that regard, we are modernizing the RIM processes, and we have prepared a records and information management implementation quick reference guide, which is geared at supporting ministries, departments, and agencies in the implementation of the RIM program. And so at this time, we'll ask Minister Morgan to present this quick reference guide document to the representative of Cohort 3, Mr. Hector Stevenson, who is the Executive Director for the Overseas Examination Commission, which is one of the entities implementing in Cohort 3.
We're not supposed to shake hands, you know.
That is true.
So
I just
can.
hold the document.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This is yours.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. In the same breath, I'll ask Mr. Cox to present you with a package from the Access to Information Unit.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. All right.
Thank you. At this time, I want to thank everyone for joining, and thank you very much for tuning in. We will continue through to section B. So this really ends section part A of the session. Section B is where our RIM analysts, records analysts from the Jamaica Archives and Records Department will take our RIM practitioners through a series of record survey training, and that they will, our analysts will lead us on that, and they will now take us through the presentation on record survey. Miss Christelle Scott and Miss Kimberly Skiles, Records Management Analyst, Senior Records Management Analyst, Acting Miss Scott, and Records Management Analyst, Miss Skiles from the Jamaica Archives and Records Department.
My name is Christelle Scott. I am the Senior Records Management Analyst from Jamaica Archives and Records Department. And as we look at records and information management and ensuring that it supports access to information, it all starts with the practical guides to record survey. With me today is Miss Kimberly Skiles, a Records Management Analyst, and she will be doing the second aspect of the presentation. The workshop goals. Our goal is to help teams and individuals to understand what is a record survey. It's also to identify the purpose of record survey, and finally to assist teams and individuals in planning and completing the record survey activity. What is a record survey? A record survey is a systematic exercise which is used to identify what records are located throughout the entity, to identify business-generated records. It's used to acquire the necessary knowledge needed to maintain, establish a proper RIM program, and this is done by investigating what records exist within the entity and analyzing the record to provide for a classification scheme and accurate records appraisal. The purpose of the record survey is to identify the relationships between records and their organizational functions. It's to assess the physical state of records, including their location, media, and quantity. Also, it includes gaining control of existing records and bringing them into a managed environment. Finally, the purpose of the survey is to inform the development of a retention schedule and the filing scheme. There are 3 types of surveys, and they are observation, questionnaire, and interview. An observation involves entering the organization and just observing what happens. You will look at the different activities taking place, how persons interact, and how records are transferred from one department or one individual to another. It is the most reliable form of survey, and it gives accurate and detailed information. A questionnaire is quick, and it's very easy and sufficient to gather information. It relies on individuals, however, to complete this information, and at times the information may not be accurate or it will be unbiased as possible based on the questions asked. The best format that we recommend, the best type of survey that we recommend, is an interview. An interview is a face-to-face method of capturing the data. Therefore, questions would be generated to ensure that clarifications are provided and that detailed answers relating to what records are existing are answered. There are 10 steps in the record survey exercise. Step 1, establishing objectives and scope. Step 2, obtaining resources. Step 3, undertaking background research. Step 4, to prepare the survey forms and database. Step 5, to establish the schedule and simply beginning. Step 6, to hold initial meeting with operational managers and staff. Step 7, label locations and equipment. Step 8, observe and measure records and systems. Step 9, document findings. And finally, step 10, to analyze findings and make recommendations. We'll take you through each step. Step 1, establishing the objectives and scope. The scope simply limits the extent to which the record survey will be conducted. For example, ministries will have headquarters, or they may have offices off-site. So the scope would indicate if only the ministry headquarters would be focused on, or if the ministry at the headquarters and other offices off-site will be also within that program, within the exercise. The objective simply says what you aim to achieve at the end of the record survey. Going on to step 2, we look at obtaining the resources. These are the tools that you will need to conduct the survey. First and foremost, which is highly important, to have protective gears. Gloves, lab coats, and dust masks to protect the individuals who are conducting the survey. Adhesive labels, or crack and peel, most properly known, and they are used to label the files and the equipment, storage equipment. We also have pens, pencils, scissors, rubbers, microfiber cloth, and markers. Moving on to step 3, we look at undertaking the research. This is done to gain an understanding of what happens within the entity, to find out what the functions are and the structures of the organization, and also to note any changes to the functions and the structure over time. Identifying this information is pivotal because it will help you to understand what information is being generated in the entity. Key managers and other staff will have to be interviewed before you inspect the record. Step 4, preparing the survey form and database. It simply means you will get a sample of this form from Jamaica Archives and Records Department, and you will have to print if the survey will be done physically, or ensure that the electronic form is on the proper computer systems that will be used to capture this information. Moving on to step 5, we look at establishing and begin. Before you begin the record survey, you will have to inform staff members when the survey is expected to begin and schedule start date with the different officers. You will need to ensure that each office has a timeline going in. At this stage, you will inform the staff members that no records should be changed and move until the survey process and the classification and retention schedule has completed. In step 5, we continue building out the establishment by setting a schedule and conducting the survey. After gathering the dates from the officers, you would set the schedule according to the chronological order. And this schedule would include the departments, the name of the officers, the estimated hours, and the survey officers who will be going in from time to time. In conducting the survey, you would want to begin first and foremost with those offices or departments which would be most cooperative to the process, or simply their record system, their records transfer is not as fast-paced as other offices. Step 6, holding meetings with managers and staff. After you have set the schedule, you'd want to email it to the relevant staff members and all of the staff members to involve them in this process. Then you would visit each supervisor individually to explain what the process is and how it will benefit each office. This is to ensure that any concerns are addressed individually. You will also, in this step, visit with the survey team and introduced the team to the different supervisors, explaining the duration of the survey in the offices, and also explaining that they will not be removing any files. They will be simply capturing the information within the offices. Continuing to step 6, I hand over to Ms. Skyers to continue.
Okay, so step 7, this is where you actually start doing the work. You're required to label all locations and equipment. There are several points where the records may be stored, such as in your registry or your documentation center, in offices where they're usually created. You have your in trays, your out trays, your filing cabinets, on shelves. Also in your record storage room or your computer, you're required to label all locations and all equipments where the records can be found. For step 8, you're doing the observation and measuring records and systems. The record survey should cover all official records, both ordinary and confidential. So every record located within your system, you are required that all of these records are captured within the survey. The team must identify and label the filing locations, such as your shelf. If the records are found on your shelves, you label them. We have abbreviations that we use to label these files, and you will further on hear all these abbreviations go, right? You're also required to give each filing point a control number that is an abbreviation of the type of filing equipment or location, plus the sequential number for the item. So example, if you have certain cabinets within your location, each cabinet will be labeled as cab 1, cab 2, and cab 3. You're also required to label the drawers of those cabinets. So each drawers will be drawer 1, drawer 2, drawer 3. Right? Continuing, you're also required to number the files found in various locations in the sequence, such as the first file in the first cabinet. So your cab 1, for your control number, you'll have cab 1, drawer 1, and /1 for the first file within that cabinet. If they're located on a shelf, you will have shelf 1, box 1, /1 for the first file in box 1 on shelf 1. You're required to label the shelves from top to bottom and left to right. And once you enter a room, you label your equipment from left to right. So if you have several cabinets within that room, you label cab 1, cab 2, going from a left to right flow. The control number should be written on a sticker, and then the sticker is placed on the right side of the file. The file is then returned to its location, whether it should be in a box or within that cabinet. And of course, this is very important because the purpose of this is that you will be able to identify the files and the location where each of these files came from. For the abbreviations, you have some for the location and some for file types. For location, we have BX for boxes, CAB for cabinet, DSK for desk, DRW for drawer, FLR floor, SHF for shelf, and TAB for tab. You'll also need a RW, and that's for the rows within the shelves. For the file types, we use FF for flat folder. Those are the usual folders that you store files in. We have BF for box files, BIN for bindle, BUN for bundle, ENV for envelope, REG for your registers. Then we have some image displaying the box files, the binders, and the envelopes that the records may be stored in. In completing the form, for your file reference number, this is usually located at the top right-hand corner of the file. If it does not have a file reference number, that's fine. You just leave the section blank. For file title or description, the file title that you see on the file, you write it as is. If there are no title, that's fine, but you're also required to scan through the file, and you're also required to give a description of the contents of that file. And describe this content as accurately and as briefly as possible. Recording the covering dates, we have a from and a to section. The from date is usually found at the back of the file, which is the earliest date of the file. To is usually located at the top. You will, however, find some files that are not in a chronological order. You are required again to scan through these files and find the earliest and the latest date to put in within these columns. You are required also to put only the month and the year for the date. For unfiled or loose papers, we ask that you leave this as is and do not capture the information from it. However, you might have some files where you still have loose sheets in those. Those information you are required to capture. For books and publications within the office, these should be identified and be separated from the files. Printed or published books should not be listed unless your entity are the creators of these materials. However, for bound volume of records, these should be listed, and if there are other records in the filing cabinets and shelves. For the transfer details of the form, this is usually a gray section. We ask that you leave this section blank. This section is normally used when the system change is done and a new system is being introduced. If your files have been transferred or moved, then your indication should be written within these columns, and a new classification code is written here. If the files have been destroyed, then of course you're also required to list that information here. For the movement of records, no records or documents should be removed from the offices, or if indeed necessary, this is another process we call the decongestion process. Not until we have completed the survey, then we'll actually remove these inactive records from within your storage. Step 9, your document finding. This is where you're required to capture all the information from the document onto the record survey form. Ensure that all the requirements from the observing and measuring step is adhered to. And your final step is where you analyze the findings and make recommendations. So the database and spreadsheet software may be used to help with analysis, and this analysis should concentrate on the issues that form the main focus of your survey. The surveying equipment. Displaying on your screen, you're seeing the survey form at the top. We have paper tapes, which can be used as their adhesive labels if you do not have any crack and peel in-house. You also need a scissors to cut the tape to label your files, and also the equipment. You'll need the markers to label, and of course the pen to complete the form. In labeling the cabinet. Here's a video demonstration. Of course, this is cab 1. So we enter the room, and this is the first cabinet on the left side of the room. We label it cab 1 at the top. Cab 1, drawer 1 is the first drawer of that cabinet. Of course, you will continue. So cab 1/drawer 2 would be for the second drawer. Cab 1/1 drawer 3 would be for the third drawer, and cab 1/drawer 4 would be for the fourth drawer on this cabinet. In completing the form, you have already labeled your cabinet, so we are required now to remove the files from the cabinet and complete your form. So the first thing on the form is that you complete your location number, and this is your cab 1/drawer 1. If this was on a shelf, it will be SHF 1/row 1. Right? Your file type, sorry, your file type, further on the video. Further on in the video, we'll be removing, these are flat folders. So FF, as the abbreviation for flat folders, is written on the form. The file reference number is the top number that is located at the right hand of the file. This you will see on the files. If there is no reference number, again, you leave the section blank. File titles, you write the titles as is from the file that is within the cabinet. If no titles, scan through and give your description of what is it that you see within the file. Of course, the covering dates, the from and to. From is the earliest date, month and year, and to, the latest date, again, month and year, as seen here. And of course, the transfer section, the gray area, is left blank for the records that will be destroyed, transferred, or moved to another location. For records found on the floor, yes, this is possible also. We ask that you label the floor. You will not have a floor 1 or a floor 2. So we ask that you just label it as FLR for floor. And as seen here, this is the file that has no reference number, it has no title, and of course some loose sheets are within a file. But the loose sheets at the top, you are asked to disregard those. However, the ones found within the file, you have to capture those information. So you're required to go through the file, scan through, and record everything as you see within the file, as seen displayed on the screen. So the file that was on the floor, this is how we label it, FLR/1, because it is the first file that was found on the floor. Activity 1, we're going to complete a mock survey, and this will be done by a representative from the Office of the Public Defender.
On Teams. Person on Teams. Person's on Teams.
She's on Teams.
Yes.
Began our survey with the record survey form for PRIMS, and our location is cab 1, draw 1. Our folder type is flat folder. Our reference number 34907, and the complainants, the file title, Shellyan Buchanan. Ms. Buchanan had complained about wrongful dismissals from PICA. Our complaint was made on the 1st of April 2006, and that's when we started our investigation, and it concluded on the 3rd of June 2008. The file was replaced in cab 1, draw 1. The first file in the cabinet was the draw 1, cab 1. The second file number, the person's name, the complaint against RGD, the commenced investigation when the complaint was made the 13th of August 2007, and we concluded the 10th of September 2007 and replaced that file in cabinet, placed second file in drawer 1. The other file, the complaint was made security. It was a pension matter. We commenced investigation when the complaint was made on 21st of August 2007, and we concluded on the 22nd of October 2007, and we replaced the file as follow 1, 2, and 3. That's the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Ms. Denton from the Office of the Public Defender. Mr. Cargill will take over and conclude this Cohort 3 launch.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scott and Ms. Kyles for the presentation. Before we conclude and address the matter of the way forward, I'll just ask if there are any questions from the participants on the presentation that we could, if there are any questions, we could take those at this time. If you have a question, you could just go ahead and we will respond to the questions, if there are any, on the presentation.
Hello, good morning. Hello.
Morning.
Hi, I'm Patricia from MNS. I'd like to find out what are some of the questions that would be asked.
There's a question from MNS.
Yeah.
But it needs to come up on here.
Ministry of National Security, Patricia Long. Yes, I would like to find out what are some of the questions that would be asked when you're conducting an interview.
Okay, when you're conducting an interview, some of the questions that could be asked are what is the nature or the function of the size generated? So find out what was the purpose of this file being created and also what it includes. Is it a series or are they sub-series of a major series? So you want to identify how the file also flows in terms of the record being generated in the office and then moving to another officer for conducting or concluding or adding another information. And also, you'd want to find out as well how long these records would last for in terms of a retention period and where they would normally store it in the office before they move it to a record center or a registry. So these are some of the questions that you would ask.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? We'll take one or two before we conclude. Okay, since there are no other questions, I think we will wrap up. Mrs. Thomas. Mrs. Thomas will indicate to us the way forward, after which I'll close off. Mrs. Claudette Thomas.
Yes, Mr. Cargill. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. I'd like to thank all participators. Would like to say no for all cohorts.
Okay, I'll do it. This.
Are you unable to hear me?
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas.
Could you ask Christelle? Could you ask Christelle to go ahead with the way forward?
In terms of the way forward for Cohort 3, there are some timelines that you would have been provided for completing a record survey. So we'll start our record survey in Q2, and we will continue to February 21. So it is expected that you will be working on your record survey in the areas that you have selected, whether the 3 divisions within the entity, and that JARD analysts will provide you with the necessary support for carrying out the survey. As you undertake the survey, you would be required to provide weekly, monthly reports in terms of the number of surveys that have been completed for each section. And the hope is that for this period that you would have completed the surveys for the areas specified. And these would have been outlined in your project charter. And so we look forward to those. Again, remember the records analysts from JARD assigned to each ministry, department, and agency will provide you with the support needed to undertake the survey. Again, if there are any questions, any challenges, once those challenges arise, please feel free and please make contact with your analysts who will be in constant dialogue with you. And so again, the analysts will continuously follow up with you to ensure that the surveys are being done. So that is the way forward. Thank you again. I would just like to thank everyone for joining and to indicate that we're looking forward to the work that will continue or will commence here onwards. The launch is important, yes, but the work that will continue after today is essential. And I remind you of the commitment and that our minister made, and that the ministry is really focused on ensuring that our records management systems are effective within the ministries, departments, and agencies so that we can provide better services to the people of Jamaica. Thank you again for joining, and have a wonderful day, and again, have a productive International Day for the Universal Access to Information. Thank you, and have a good day.
Searching online. It's what most of us do every day. Information is the world's new currency, and the provision of quality information is what is